Warrant Officer Ken Robertson, OAM, is Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chief of the Defence Force. Enlisting in the Royal Australian Air Force in 1995, Ken has accumulated extensive experience, including deployment to the Middle East. He was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia for his exceptional service as Command Warrant Officer, Joint Task Force 633, recognised for his outstanding leadership and contributions to the operations and welfare of personnel under his command. With a commitment to promoting defence values and ethical leadership, Ken brings a wealth of experience and insight to this role, where he advises on enlisted personnel matters and ADF culture. Ken is married to Melissa and they have 3 children. His hobbies include basketball, military history, spending time with his family and supporting the West Coast Eagles. I think we might have a chat about the West Coast Eagles. Ken Robinson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much and thanks for having me here.
Yeah, it's good. I did read that and it's all very official and you've got some wonderful achievements and then you went West Coast Eagles, which I've got a soft spot with, but can we say they're in a rebuild at the moment?
Yeah, look, for the most part, 2018 will live on for a while with me, but there's as West Australian football followers and West Coast Eagles followers in particular, we're very impatient, so there better be some success around the corner.
For anyone listening who doesn't understand the significance, and Ange, you know what happened in 2018, don't you? What happened with West Coast Eagles in 2018?
I'm assuming that was their glory years.
They won the premiership and they went from winning the premiership to not winning the premiership, winning the wooden spoon.
I think mediocrity would be a good word. Yeah, it just shows the level of competition across the AFL. But yeah, very impatient members and supporters there.
They're in good hands. CEO Don Pike, who's got a great pedigree, a West Coast Eagles premiership winner, has done a lot of coaching as well. So I was actually there having a look around their facility with Kieran and Jack, who I know well.
Yeah, the Latham Left Lane Park.
Yeah, it's amazing. So Kieran, I know, listens to this podcast. So KJ, shout out to you as well. And I know he's very buoyant about the future and where they're going. We can talk more about West Coast Eagles. We'll have a coffee after this. To start with, because a lot of our audience, they look at defence and they look at a role like yours, and you're a big man. You're 6'5", you told me 6'6" in boots. And there's this sometimes imposing nature on defence. But what I love, you meet the real people behind the clothes and behind the uniform. So let's start with your personal story. Can I go way back as a young fella? What was life like for you growing up? And as I ask that, your lips start to smile.
Yeah, look, I'm a proud West Australian. I grew up in Perth, Western Australia, and did my schooling in the northern suburbs of Perth. My family ended up settling in a place called 2J, which is about 80 kilometres east of Perth. I had a really settled childhood, no problems whatsoever. As I started to reach my teenage years, started not running off the rails, but starting, I suppose, challenging the status quo. My parents then offered me the opportunity, because I had an interest I think Top Gun had come out around that time or something like that. And
Maverick or Goose?
I'm the Goose, I'm pretty sure. But at the time, an interest in military aviation. So my father suggested maybe air cadets. So I ventured down that path and it was like a fish to water, I suppose. I really enjoyed the structure of it. I really enjoyed the military leadership and the discipline, even at cadet level. Like I'm fascinated even today of that youth development program itself was pivotal, not only for developing future military personnel of the Australian Defence Force, but just making better humans who contribute towards Australian society. It's a wonderful youth development program. But from there, I finished my schooling. I tried to join the military twice, actually. I had a real interest in joining early on. I just wanted to, I was around year 10. I didn't have the grades for it at that stage, and also tried to join the Royal Australian Navy as a submariner. I was told I was too tall.
I was going to say, you're a big unit for a submariner.
Yeah, so I think at the time I was Oberon class submarines, and so I was. The best piece of advice I got was to go back and finish year 12, finish my schooling, and then reapply. And as I did that in 1995, it was only a couple of years after high school. I thought, right, I'm ready for this again, and I reapplied. And in 1995, I entered the Royal Australian Air Force. So it's, that's a snapshot of my childhood. I was heavily into sport, basketball in particular, Australian rules football.
With WA, they do have rugby union, and there's a rugby league team starting, the Perth Bears apparently coming.
When I was there, we had the Western Reds too, but I think they tried to schedule their games around the same time as West Coast and Freo, so it wasn't too successful.
That was Super League, wasn't it? When they put a team over
absolutely. Yeah. So they do. Perth is a heavily orientated sporting city, so I grew up with, I suppose, in a team atmosphere also, but I was very competitive also, which has waned over the years, but very competitive in sport, and I found that was a really good outlet. But what I liked about the team part of sport growing up was the same thing I loved about cadets. And it's the same thing I loved about when I joined the military. It's just your part. One person doesn't make the team, and you're just a small cog in a large machine, which requires everyone to work well individually to gain those outcomes from a team perspective. But yeah, it seemed to transition well from sport to cadets to joining the military.
So in year 9 or 10, normally in Australia they'll have a career advisor at high school go, what do you want to be when you grow up? Did they ask you that question around year 9 or 10? Because your dad obviously made a decision or tried to influence you towards...
I think my dad pushed me more towards just having a bit more discipline in my life. He grew up in a disciplined family, and he thought the military could provide that for me. My career advisor, for the most part, wanted me to... I think he pushed me down a sporting path. He thought I didn't think I was ever going to play AFL, but he thought a career in sport or sport management would be ideal, but I was always going to join the military. I just had that mindset from year 10. I didn't have the grades back then to become an officer, so I just wanted to try and join. I didn't care how you get me in. Very fortunate to have a father who guided me down that path, I suppose, but more importantly, my school was supportive of it. And I had a teacher there who was ex-military, Vietnam veteran, who kind of took me under his wing and kind of guided me that way too. So yeah, I've got a lot to be thankful for in that regard.
I don't think you know this, Ange, but I've got 4 kids. Ken, my eldest, Michaela, 16, said recently she wants to join the Defence Force. And she said, what do you think? I said, I'm delighted, because I feel like I'm on the recruitment program, because, Ange, the last 2.5 years we've been running a social mastery program that started with maritime acquisition sustainability. Now it's across Defence Force as far as Navy, Army, Air Force and Australian public sector. So Mickey said to me, she wants to join Defence Force.
It's very different, because I thought she wanted to be a model at one stage as well. It's very different career paths.
It can change on a weekly basis.
Well, what I can assure you is that we'd look after her. And I think the focus towards that also, and bringing the more focus about, hey, when you join the military, you're part of the family. It's not your original family, but it's an extension of it. We take a really serious concentration towards that these days.
So what do you do? Like, this is N=1, so we're going down the whole career path options. But Mickey's in year 11, so young male or female, and we have a broad audience, Ken, that listens to this podcast, from athletes to corporates to defence to all walks of life. So someone listening to this who is a child or who is more likely a parent of a child at that age, how do they go about finding what options?
I'd really impress upon them 2 things. One, be inquisitive on the ADF recruiting website, ADF Careers. I mean, if you Google ADF Careers, there's a plethora of information there. And not the same as what it used to be when I joined the organisation, is that you had to walk into a recruiting centre to give you this pack full of paper that thick and like a volume, nearly an encyclopedia of information that you had to wade through. You just need to merely put in a Google search about what they would like to do or what they're interested, and for the most part, there will be an aligned career path within the ADF, whether that's, I mean, we're talking previously before the podcast about, cyber and space. I mean, there's now careers within the Australian Defence Force for that, which just didn't exist when I joined. Equally, just that information at your fingertips, as well as online forums, I found have been useful. I wouldn't say to use them as gospel, especially some of the social media sites, but I note on Facebook in particular, there's a number of sites where people say, hey, I'm looking at joining. Can someone give me a no-duff kind of bottom line up front about what it's like to go through recruiting? And you've got people who've just finished recruiting giving that sense of how the process went for them. Mm-hmm. And sure, it's individual in nature, but it's just a plethora of information out there. And also reach out to, if you live near a local military establishment, reach out to that people on that establishment. I remember being a base warrant officer in Wagga Wagga, and I used to have a plethora of people ask me, hey, would love to come out and see the base and have a look around. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. And I think there's more these days in particular, there's more openness to that. Yeah. To say, hey, look, this is what we do. Sure, there's parts of the organisation we can't tell you too much about because of the sensitivity of information and whatnot and the security, but for the most part, we're an open book.
I was born in Wagga Wagga.
Oh, very good.
Totally nothing to do with our
That
running
explains
sheet.
your sporting background.
Well, there's a lot of athletes from Wagga, but my
Absolutely.
mum was from the Rock.
Ah, right.
Yeah, which back then was like a little outpost now. It's a
Played
very
footy
trendy
out there.
suburb. Did you?
Yeah,
The Rock
2000
Huron Creek.
Huron Creek Footy Club.
Did you play for the Rock?
Yeah, I did. 2001, I played a few games as I got posted into Wagga.
You would have met
Small
my
world.
uncle Colin Moore and
Yeah.
Brody Moore. You know,
Yeah,
Brody
I know the Moores. Yeah,
Brody's my cousin.
So there you go.
And
Small
Nicholas
world.
is my cousin.
What a
as well.
small world.
You basically know
Small
everyone.
world.
Anytime we have somebody that says they're from a country town, there's a connection there. I don't know how you do it.
Well, I was born in Wagga Wagga, lived in Glen Innes, cultured in Yass, sophisticated in Dubbo, and then rounded out in Hobart.
But it just goes to the heart also about relationships, right? And connections.
They would have loved you up at that centre half forward at the Rock.
Yeah, well, they had me. Mark O'Leary was the ruckman there at the time. Just this big brute of a man, and so yeah, it wasn't much room for me in the ruck. But yeah, I played a bit of centre half forward, but just a wonderful community too. Yeah, rally around their footy club. It's like just a centre.
Beautiful town. Well, there you go, Michaela. ADF Careers website, and we might go and have a look at the local defence base, which for us would be Navy base out in Sydney Harbour. So.
Yeah, Fleet Base East.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of connections. Give me a yell.
Okay, Michaela, don't say Dad doesn't ever think about you in his podcast.
Oh, nice one. One of the things that you said, Ken, about being in the military is, and I think this is a theme that has come across with the number of people that we've interviewed in this podcast, the feeling like being part of the military is a family. What do you think contributes to that?
I think a common set of values. So each service used to have a set of their own service values, individual service values. And then in recent years, that's changed to have one set of defence values. And so those values, I think we are a values-based organisation. So regardless of what part of Australian society you come from, we hold ourselves to those set of values. And so, and just like any family, there's a value set within each family, right? So I think that would be my primary answer to that question, is that as a values-based organisation, we actually care for people, we respect people, but also what we are preparing our people for is high-end warfighting, is at a particular point in time, maybe on behalf of the Australian government, giving your life for your country. Now, that takes a certain amount of resilience, it takes a certain amount of development, it takes a certain amount of courage, and when you do that as a team and you do that as a unit of people together, you can't not grow closer to each other. You can't not form bonds which are strong. And even if you get around the organisation, you talk to military personnel, they'll say that some of the bonds that they've forged through operational service in particular have made them, their friends and mates, closer, or as close as family as you can get. And I think that's what primarily why people say military service and serving in the military is like being like in a family. And I think there's, for the most part for me, I see some of my best friends I consider to be family, just purely because some of the experiences we've shared, both through training, through preparedness, and then on operations, in particular the Middle East. So I think that goes a long way to explaining that. In
preparation for this interview, you have a little bit of a social media footprint, which was nice, because a lot of people, when we've interviewed in defence, they don't. Yeah. And you use X. I always go to call it Twitter. Yeah. So can we pick up on that value of care? Because when I look at two posts, so one of yours, you talk about, this is back on 30th of March, wonderful to catch up with my godson Aaron today, whilst he enjoys a few hours of personal time from recruit training, Oz Army recruit training. I promised his dad before he sadly passed away that I would look out for him, but I've needed to do little of that. A fine young Australian. That was just a beautiful post, and I learned a lot about you through that, the compassion, the care.
Yeah, I think also, thank you for that. It's humbling. Being transparent and being a transparent leader and being a humble leader, I think also comes with some, and I know through reading your book in particular about being vulnerable, Sure. And when you have an online presence, as you're well aware, is that it comes with a fair degree of vulnerability. Now, there's been a number of posts I've put up both on Twitter and LinkedIn in particular where I've got feedback which hasn't been necessarily of a constructive or positive nature. That's okay.
Internal feedback from other people in defence?
And external. No, not so much internal. I think I've been really well supported by my senior officers who I've worked for. They've said, hey, look, let your conscience be your guide. Which is a powerful statement in my opinion, and being in a values-based organisation, it makes you think about what you're about to write. But equally, I think, in particular with Aaron, his father and I are very close, and as we spoke about before in regards to those relationships that you make and build, he was a mentor of mine for many, many years. You know, to take on that responsibility of being a godfather when I was at an age where I was struggling to look after myself, that was a responsibility which I took very seriously. And now Aaron being part of the Australian Regular Army,
I think you've modelled him well.
Yeah, I played a little part in that development, but he's a humble young man and very much because of his mother and his father, he's got those values. So, yeah, no, thank you. That means a lot. But with transparency, you'll get criticism. But the best feedback I've received from people is that they can't not say when they've had interactions with me, either online or in person, that they've walked away without having a full understanding about what my viewpoint is. Or my saying is I'm employed to speak truth to power, but I'm also employed to speak truth to people. And if I can't be transparent through such mediums as social media in my position, if I can't be rather honest with my viewpoints, which may come across as being sometimes controversial, well, then I can't do my job. Yeah, it's been a journey. When I first came on the Twitter, I thought, this is wonderful. And then all of a sudden you get different viewpoints from people or criticisms from people that don't know you, or they form opinion of you.
Is that because of your role, or is it just because the core is like, there's some people out there who just love being annoyed and angry and pissed off with the world.
Keyboard warriors.
Yeah, but is there a view that our leaders in defence shouldn't have a viewpoint or shouldn't have a personality?
Geez, that's a good question. And as I said at the start of the podcast, I'm rather frank in my answers, so I will continue on that vein. I think, and I'm of the firm opinion that Defence Force personnel and leadership should clearly have their own personal viewpoints of Australian society, which may include politics, etc. But officially, we shouldn't have an opinion in that regard, and I still hold to that. And I've been influenced by that by senior officers along the journey. But that doesn't mean I don't have an opinion on how Defence is operating. And you can walk a line in that regard. And as a warrant officer, I'm employed to actually provide a quite stark viewpoint from a workforce perspective, which isn't coloured by a whole bunch of flowery words, or isn't coloured by, and maybe quite contrary to what some senior officers may think. The employment of a warrant officer or a senior enlisted leader is to actually speak truth to power, to actually give a viewpoint on behalf of the workforce which breaks through some of those bureaucratic processes, to be clearly cognizant of the chain of command and to work with the chain of command. But my position is not employed to put, let's say, lipstick on a pig. As an analogy. So I'm not employed to do that. And so sometimes if I express an opinion like that, either via social media or via to people, they're not used to that, because I think as a society, rightly or wrongly, we're not used to hearing it bottom line up front. We're not used to hearing, let's just say, viewpoints or which may be contrary to a popular opinion.
We're a similar vintage. You're doing a little bit better in the hair stakes than I am.
I don't know how.
But I struggle, and you said this, and I thank you for the feedback that you connected with the book Match Fit, and you liked that I was open in that.
The vulnerability in particular.
That was new for me, because I'd built a career up until 40, and my marriage broke down, on external, and I was very much performance-based as far as my identity. I perform, therefore I am. It was all very external. And then I thought sharing some challenges or struggles where I know with Ange, you're more comfortable with that, and Wiz just turned over 30, poor old guy. And my team openly, Ken, will say, oh, this is bad, or that's shit, or I didn't do that. And it took me a long time to get to that stage because I thought so incorrectly that as a leader in sport and what I was doing, that everyone would look at me negatively if I said I didn't have all my stuff together, how wrong I was. Were you always like that, or is there a couple of moments?
Oh, no. I reckon that there's going to be a few people listening to this podcast that are going to remember a young Ken Robertson, and and I've had some of my most influential mentors were the ones that pulled me aside. And what occurred primarily is my competitiveness, that white line fever, going across playing, a combative sport like AFL, transgressed to basketball, then transgressed to normal life, where I was like competitive to a point where I wasn't actually understanding that my ego was getting in the way of me developing robust, personal and professional working relationships. And it took some really good friends and my wife to pull me aside and say, we know who the real person is. What is this front that you're putting up? And you're getting across to being a right idiot. And
what age was this?
Oh, geez, I think I was. It would have been about maybe 15 years ago. Okay. 15 years, so around 35, 34. But the people that had an opinion of me, which really affected me, because I thought I'm not that person. But clearly, I'd been putting across a persona which was egotistical, or to a point, competitive, which is dismissive of others. Yeah, that was my moment. And to have some of my best friends turn around and say, hey, off the field, we know who you are and we get along famously with you, but on the field, I think that was and from then on, I think that was the line in the sand moment for me, where I went, you know what? And as I got older and I couldn't compete at a level that I was used to, I started to think, what is the benefit of being the type of person I am, and the persona I'm giving out, as opposed to being the genuine me? And there came a sense of relief, I suppose, after that. I was like, well, and then people would say, oh, geez, people come up to me today going, geez, I remember playing footy with you. And I go, I apologise in advance. Really? Yeah, and I'm finding I was saying sorry. I was even finding when I was speaking to friends about, they'd talk about the achievements that we had with basketball and whatnot, and I'd say, I'm embarrassed about that part of my life. They go, why? I go, well, just the way that I kind of acted. That wasn't me. And and there was a lot of correlation with my career. My career wasn't going that far until I actually had that line in the sand moment when I realised, in defence, people matter, and engagement and relationships matter, and having that type of persona will get you only so far, and it'll drive you. And I take examples of the special operations community. I have many friends in that community. They are some of the most humble people getting around on the planet. Yet what they do is just high-end stuff, which I could only ever imagine.
I've met a number of those people, and you're so right. And you often meet someone who's early in their career, and if anyone tells you how good they are, you run a million miles. It's the ones you have to pull a little bit more information out that are calm.
I was one of those formers, so I'd have no problem telling you how good I was. But
there's someone else in this room who would have also been carrying on like a bit of a big dog. I reckon people who associated with me, like I've still got a number of friends I've kept through those years. I reckon some people that work with me in my 30s would think I'm an absolute twat.
Mm. Oh, absolutely.
I'm curious as to...
You're going to say not in your 30s, it's people that work with you now. Angela Poon.
I didn't know you in your 30s, thankfully. But I'm curious to know why, and this is probably a question for both of you, why did you feel like you needed to put up that front or be that person that...
God, we're going to get deep now, aren't we? Yeah. You can lead on this one.
I think in the military that I joined, it was not survival of the fittest, but the only way to get really ahead was to be that outward strong character, which showed no signs of emotion, even when, showing signs of vulnerability probably would have assisted you. That type, it was just a different culture. I mean, we were talking about before, like just 30 years ago, totally different landscape culturally, both in Australian society and the military. So I just felt that I had to be that person in order to be successful. Or I had to be that person to hide my own fallacies or my own inadequacies or my own insecurities for the most part. Putting up a bold front, it's like I own a Maltese Shih Tzu. That's right. It's
that is not the dog.
Not the type of dog that I thought you would have had.
I think so. Look, I've got a
German
Ridgeback or a
Shepherd.
blue cow dog or
I own a
a
Maltese Shih Tzu.
I've got a fluffy Groodle, and you will look at my Groodle walk.
Well, you'll know what I'm
people
talking
laugh.
about when they have more front than a Myer shop window at Christmas. But if you look at them deep down, they're just this. I know my dog in itself. He's just a big sook, but he puts up this front. And it's very similar to what happened with me, but then I had that line in the sand. So I'd be interested in what led to your line in the sand moment there.
Mine was twofold. I was good at running from a young age, and I just liked winning, and that really built an identity that I was the runner, and that I had all this external feedback. So when you talk about a performance-based identity, it's external, extrinsic, exogenous. So it's all outside you. And I had a really interesting conversation with a footballer, I won't mention his name, this morning before we went on. I'll come back to the beautiful chat we had this morning related to this. So it fueled me. Balanced with that, I had low self-esteem, and I didn't realise this until many years later. I think that was being a skinny kid with big hair. In fact, my best mate Mario at my wedding said, Andy looks like the love child of Steve Monaghetti and John Bon Jovi. And that gives a really good visual. Watching the way Ken just cracked up laughing. So I think that combination, I was getting the external validation from winning, and then I got that in building businesses. But underneath it all, am I good enough? So I kept thinking I have to achieve bigger goals, bigger tasks to get the external feedback. So, my precipice moment was going through a marriage breakdown, then pulling everything back, then having to build it up again to get a nice balance between, hey, and you don't be your role to Chief of Defence Force if you're not driven.
Yeah, no, that's
You've got
right.
to have the drive.
I mean, ego is good to a point. It gets you out of bed in the morning. It gets you disciplined to go to the gym. It gets you disciplined to get out and run a half marathon or a marathon. I mean, not that I've done those, but the discipline in my life has been primarily driven by not only other people, but my own self-pride and ego. But then and what I found is that there's a point that then it starts to be counterproductive. And if that's in relation to my relationships with my colleagues, that's in relationships with my family, that's in relationships with senior officers, there's a point there. And I think for the most part, I didn't understand where that point was until it came to a point in my life where it's like, where I'm having people whom I trust the most and I love the most saying that, hey, it's not working.
There's so many parallels. So my life blew up, and because I come from an Irish Catholic background as well, other X is the embarrassment of the marriage breakdown. Not actually the marriage breakdown as much, it was more the embarrassment of what people would think. So interesting in what you've said, I often say to athletes or high performers or founders, a chip on the shoulder gets you going. Because if anyone's listening to this going, I don't need to have a chip or drive, bullshit, you need to have that flame inside you. So rounding out the conversation I said to one of my footballers this morning, we're just having a chat about what he can do to really go into that extra little percentage for the rest of the season. So we spoke about that, the chip, but balance with purpose. And he's got a beautiful Maori background and some beautiful words there around whaka, papa and legacy. So we had a really nice conversation about balancing the two. So use the chip, but balance that with more longer term purpose alignment. So that's where I've got to. You can still have the performance-based
100%.
Identity, but you have a purpose-based identity.
I think
as well.
I'll give a shout out to, it's not often that Aussies give shout outs to Kiwis, do they? But
we take the piss out of them.
Yeah, we do. But I can assure you the New Zealand Defence Force in particular, from a cultural and their Maori culture and background and how they've linked that into their leadership continuum in particular, we have a lot to learn from them. They have a strong form of purpose and bond in regards to that. Yeah, so absolutely. Certainly some synergies there.
Didn't realise this was going to be almost a counselling session with you, Ange.
It's
Thanks,
just
Ange.
no problem. I put my psychologist hat on. For someone listening to this and they're thinking and they're going, actually, I feel very similar, or are going through that journey where you're like, yeah, I have been putting up a front and I have been putting this bravado and this act, but where do I begin to change that?
That's a great question. For me, it was kind of impressed and forced upon me because, I had a couple of really good friends and colleagues that said, hey, we need to sit you down and have a chat. But equally, if I was advising people today who may not have people like that in their lives, I'd go to friends and colleagues, or maybe even people that they may not necessarily get along with, right? And this is the most powerful part. Go to someone that you don't necessarily go along with, that you get along with. And there's generally one or two people in our lives that we think about, it'd be hard to sit down and have a beer with. Go to them and say, hey, can we have a sit down and have a coffee? And I want you to give me a bottom line up front about what you think of me and how I go about doing my business. And I've had numerous opportunities in my career to do that. Some I have taken up and some I haven't. But one of the most powerful conversations I had was with a colleague who I won't name on this podcast, but who I ended up being quite good friends with. Started off as being one of those people that just, if we were in the same room together, it'd be rather, it'd be by design. We couldn't really stand the sight of each other. But I sat down and said, look, I need you to give me a bottom line up front about how I go about doing my business. And it was powerful. And I had to park my ego to the side, right? I had to say, as much as I think what he's saying may be wrong, it's his perspective. And yeah, that's my one piece of advice I give. And it's powerful. You need to be able to put your ego to the side. And it helped me in that regard too. It was like, well, the shutters have got to come down, right? Got to become vulnerable. And you've got to accept that he or she may say things about you which you may intrinsically think is incorrect, but that's their perspective. And so if it's their perspective of someone you don't like, imagine the people in your life that are afraid to actually tell you. Yeah, I found that.
Can I ask a question on that one?
Yeah,
person?
please. Yeah.
Were you diametrically opposed, or were you very similar?
No, very similar.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, both competitive. And we'd come up against each other on the sporting field a couple of times, and there was just more that testosterone.
Because my assumption would have been, when you got two big alphas, it was like two goats with big horns running at each other.
Oh yeah, and don't get me wrong, there's a couple of relationships in my life at the moment where I need to probably do the same thing again, where, I've let my ego get in the way of sitting down and saying, hey, I'm either apologising or being vulnerable and saying, hey, I'm sorry for doing that, or what do you think of me, or what have my decisions been made? Yeah, we're two alpha guys, just both of being sporting colleagues as well as sporting opponents. And I said, and work together. And I asked him to give me a bottom line up front, which went from half hour to an hour. But it was rather powerful. And in the end, we came to quite a common understanding of each other and ended up being really good friends at the end of it. So yeah, that's a long answer to a short question. Sorry, Ange.
That you say vulnerability, but I think it also takes a lot of courage to do that as well, to set aside that ego, to approach somebody that you don't agree with and be quite open with them. It takes a open-mindedness, it takes courage, so that from somebody that is in a senior position like yourself, I think that's a great role model for people that are that you're leading to be able to see that. And,
I appreciate
and
that. Thank you, but it hasn't been the journey's hasn't been long and straight, I can assure you. So it's been learning from making mistakes. It's been learning from relationships which have gone by the wayside, and which I could have been a better human in regards to that, and then just learning through osmosis more than anything. But yeah, a bit of one piece of advice I'd give in regards to how do you actually start to get a better appreciation of who you are as opposed to who you think you are.
Gosh, I bet there's some people listening to this going, oh, I didn't expect that, and that would be really uncomfortable. It's what makes us most uncomfortable that makes us grow the most. If you always stick to the safe spot, if you do what you've done, in 10 years' time from now, you're just going to be a 10-year-old version of your current self. I love that. I love that challenge.
It comes with a fair amount of emotional intelligence too, a bit of EQ, social mastery stuff. I was very fortunate to, even though when I first joined the organisation, social mastery wasn't anything that we talked about openly. But I was very fortunate to have some very emotionally intelligent NCOs and warrant officers and officers to shape me that I didn't really know at the time they were doing that, but they were leading me to come to conclusions which I'd make mistakes, but then I'd come to the conclusion that what they were, and you look back now, I go, you know, I've called a couple of really, shouldn't say old,
mature experienced.
Yes, mature and experienced warrant officers that I worked for many, many years ago, and I've said, look, thank you. I didn't realise at the time that what you're doing was in my best interest, and I hated you for it at the time, but I kind of realised that you were trying to show me a different path.
It's like you read my running notes because I had a whole section on social mastery. But Ange, I can't help but think as Ken's answering those questions, we're ticking off self-awareness, we're ticking off relationship management. So for people listening who don't have that understanding in defence, they talk about 3 forms of mastery. There's domain mastery, so air, land, sea. Space now as well. You got technical mastery, so you could be a diesel fitter or a mechanic on a ship out in the Chinese Sea. And then you have social mastery, and that's relatively new. And this is the work we've been doing. So it starts with self-awareness, then self-management, social awareness, and then relationship management. But it's not like you go from one to the next to the next to the next. As you're talking, I'm just going, oh, that's self-awareness. Oh, he's managing relationships. Oh, how do you train that for people listening to this to not have the breakdown I did literally at 40? Your mid-30s, for people that you loved and cared about, to tell you. And do you ever think what would have your life been like if that didn't happen to you?
I wouldn't be in the position I am today, professionally and or personally. My wife would have probably left me. I'd probably be estranged from my children. You know, I hate to think about what it would have been. But I suppose, and I said it to a bunch of cadets the other day, the organiser and a bunch of people joining the organisation, the military now, I wish I was joining the military of today, and only because there's much more acceptance of social mastery and the importance of it, and emotional intelligence in particular, built into our PME now, professional military education, which was never, ever considered coming through. It was more so down that domain and technical mastery, anything to do with, I remember doing a course 25 years ago where there was like an equity and diversity course for 2 days, and people going, what the hell are you doing that for? What's this equity business? What's all this fruity stuff? Fruity, I think that was the word at the time. What's this fruity stuff you're doing? And then there was a workshop. I remember my warrant officer sending me to a workshop about workplace relationships, and this is in 1996. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting in this room and they're all going, we're talking about, being vulnerable and being aware.
Yeah. And how do you feel?
People are looking at each other going, what? Like, I'm in the military. We don't have that. And look, what I found over the years is that we need to start, and I'm a massive proponent of this within defence, is we need to look at social mastery as part of our PME and inbuilt into our PME, and just as important as other parts of our PME, such as joint professional military education, that needs to be aligned and built in at every particular rank levels. Because if we're talking about social mastery, self-awareness, relationship development as a warrant officer after 20 odd years service, or as a senior officer who's just about to take command of a ship, if we're starting to teach people that, they don't have the foundation. They don't have that foundational element of understanding about how humans tick and how people work. And then you're just setting people up for failure. And for senior leaders out there listening, my advice would be don't shy away from including social mastery or emotional intelligence training into single service PME or into just unit professional development and personal development. It lays the foundation for making you a better human and having understanding of how humans work, which in a military concept is what we do, right?
Wouldn't it be nice to have more conversations and less conflict? And you mentioned a few times emotional intelligence. So that framework actually comes from Daniel Goleman in his book that he did on emotional intelligence. So he spoke about that self-awareness, self-management, social awareness and relationship management. But
you mentioned conflict before. It's important to have conflict, and it's important.
It's like he's reading my running sheet. So keep going. But healthy conflict.
Well, absolutely. I work with a cohort of service warrant officers and regimental sergeant major of the Army. Now they are some of the most professional and respected human beings I've ever met. But I can tell you, we have differing of opinions, or we have robust conversations and discussions, where I walk out sometimes I go, I'm just not on the same page. But because we've set up that cohort and culture within it that we can be frank with each other and have those conversations, I don't leave any less respectful of them. I just think, geez, that's, I've got a differing opinion, but I can still go have a beer with them afterwards. I can still go have a coffee and talk about the footy or do whatever.
Do you use a framework for that? Because I think in sport, healthy conflict is just built in. In defence, it's built in. Where we met Ange in consulting, and if I look at banking and finance, a lot of professional service organisations, it's not built in. So here's what it looks like. I'm talking to you, and then you give me some feedback and go, oh, well, look, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate that. Let me think about it. And I walk around the corner and go, what a wanker. And then I'd absolutely pull the bayonet out. I go to town on you. And then we have these corridor conversations. It becomes like Lord of the Flies. Everyone's attacking Pigsy. And then we get in the next room a week later and there's this tension. And then it becomes this just awful, Ange, you're nodding your head. You know exactly what I'm talking about. What would you give us a framework? Because there'll be people listening to this going, that's foreign to me to even have that conversation.
Well, first and foremost, people will work you out really quickly. If you're that type of operator, if you say something to someone's face and then you say different behind closed doors, if you're that water bubbler type, gossip type person in the Australian military, you'll get worked out really quickly. Only because, like I said before about being a values-based organisation and how we communicate and how we're being effective communicators, it'll be quite apparent that it's because of you that culture in that room is like it is. And as leaders, and as warrant officers in particular, we drive culture within an organisation. So if the culture of your organisation doesn't allow to have open, transparent conversation, which might be in conflict with other opinions or each other's opinions, if you can't do that and lay it all on the table and then walk out that room and still respect that person moving forward, you'll get worked out really quickly. You'll lose trust with the people who you're charged with responsibility of leading, but more importantly, your colleagues won't respect you. And to get anything done in business, in the corporate sector, in the sporting community, in the Australian military, if you don't have the trust of your colleagues or people that you're working with or your teammates, hey, good luck achieving any success. And so my advice would be, once again, is to, it takes some vulnerability and it takes some risk. And the only risk is your own ego, right? Because as soon as you build a reputation as being someone who is open and transparent, someone who is trusting, who can have a differing of opinion but still put forward theirs and then walk out the room and say, hey, look, we'll agree to disagree, but I take on what you're saying as being valued and value that contribution and that viewpoint. All of a sudden, your reputation will precede you. And you'll walk around where people say, I can trust that person, or I can trust that warrant officer, or I can trust that officer because I know that when I'm speaking to them that they'll tell me what they're really feeling, and even if they disagree with my viewpoint, they'll still respect it. That's what I think. It takes a sense of ownership to be able to put yourself out there, knowing that, yeah, sure, there might be a couple of water bubbler conversations about you, but I'll tell you right now, the people that really matter to you will be the people who stand up for you behind closed doors, right? When your reputation procedure, you'll have people out there that, and I do it on a semi-regular basis, where someone will say, what do you think of this person? I'll go, well, you're asking me that question for a reason. I think they're a great person, or I think they're a good human. Even if I have professional differing opinions, I'll say, hey, look, I don't particularly agree with them in regards to what they think here and here, but deep down, they're a really good human. Why are you asking that question?
I feel like you've been asked a lot of challenging questions today. I think I've been asked one or two. I think someone in this room, in the name of equality, has got off quite lightly. How do you reckon that is, Ken?
Oh, it's only narrowed it down.
It's either the wizard or Ange. Wizard.
Might be
Miss Poon, Mrs. Poon, I've got a question for you. And this definitely wasn't on the running sheet. But
no.
You said even the brief with Emily Curtis. Hello, Emily. Ange said Andrew sometimes goes off the script.
Going really off script now.
When we started working together, you found it a bit challenging because my feedback can be immediate and in the moment.
Yes.
I reckon there's some people listening to this who will learn from that. Did you think I was rude and blunt, or did you just realise that was me, and have you grown to work similar?
I think receiving feedback is always hard because there's ego. So your first reaction is often defensive, or you try to justify. And what I've learned is that look at who you're receiving the feedback from, right? Is it a person that you respect? Is it a person that you care about? Does that person have your best interest? So that was something that I had to remind myself. I'm like, okay, Andrew does give feedback and is sometimes quite blunt, but why is he doing it? And
it's a caring blunt.
it is caring blunt. It is.
I'm going to write that down. Caring blunt. That's a good one.
But I know it was because you wanted me to grow professionally, to challenge myself, to push myself out there. Was it uncomfortable? Yes. So it was learning to sit in that discomfort.
That's a great point, Ange. I got told a long time ago, I got given a quote, if you're given feedback and it's uncomfortable to you, there's probably a fair element of truth to it. And if it's not, and it's something, and once again, it's feedback, and I think, you know, people say negative feedback, they say positive feedback. It's just feedback. It's how you accept it, right? And for the most part, what I've learnt is to take it on board if it affects you, and the rest throw it over your shoulder, but don't let it affect the relationship that you have with the person you're working with. And look, you can count on numerous occasions how later on I've gone back to a person and I've said, I take on board what you're saying, but the way you delivered it to me, I felt, a bit annoyed. You'd be amazed to hear how many people actually aren't aware about their delivery, about how they deliver the feedback. Some of them are just blunt, like I used to be, like straight up and down, straight 180. And it took some people to say to me, "Hey, I get your point, but the way you delivered it to me, I felt that you were talking down to me and talking, and you know what? I just went, wow, like I had no idea."
I think we've had some of those conversations.
I feel like I'm going to get a diary invite in a week's time. We're going to be sitting down in the coffee shop and Ange will say, "Hey, I've just been processing, and the way you gave that feedback." Now, in my defence, you've grown so much, and we had that agreement, and I asked Ange, I said, "Look, we can do this one of two ways. I can probably tell you what you want to hear, and we can make it comfortable, or I can tell you what you don't want to hear, and we can make it uncomfortable, but you're going to grow 10 times faster."
But I suppose in the short time that I've been interacting with you both, you can tell you're a good team, if that makes sense. And so the foundations of good teams, whether in and out of the military, are built on trust and are built on transparency. I don't know too many relationships which have ended, either both personal and professional, which haven't had rocky parts or starts. Right. And clearly you've had that.
I had no idea that we'd be talking to this man and we'd be getting guidance and counselling and frameworks. It's been a beautiful conversation.
That was very complimentary. Thank you, Ken. I do think we do work together really well. We're very, very different.
We're yin and yang. Like you're loose, you're sort of crazy, you got all this energy, you come in, shake everything up, and I'm structured and disciplined and methodical.
But even
I think you would have figured that out.
But even in the military, senior leaders, what I impress upon senior leaders, and it goes to the heart of social mastery, is that be comfortable in knowing that you're no longer the subject matter expert. And so for the most part, we have star-ranked officers and we have senior warrant officers in the organisation. It's been a long time since you're on the tools. Now, you're employed to be really good leaders of capability, leaders of teams, leaders of organisations, but you need to empower your SMEs, and you need to empower those and guide those people you have working for you. And some of the best leaders in the military that I've worked with, both star-ranked and senior enlisted, have been ones that have realised really quickly that they're no longer the expert. They have expertise in management, HR, and being able to inspire people, but they've also become quite adept at using the tools at their disposal. And those tools may be human tools and human people, and they've learned how to kind of empower them, make them feel valued, but also give them a left and right of arc in regards to what they're desired to achieve. So I think that was something which I learned a few years ago now, was I'm no longer an expert in what I was initially employed to do in Air Force. I'm now more so a HR person whose responsibility is to speak truth to power, but also ensure that the organisation's best interests are advocated at the highest level of the military. So, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
That's a blend of wisdom, self-assuredness, confidence, and confidence as a construct comes from doing the work and then backing yourself. And I think it comes from care.
Learning from your mistakes too, I think, Andrew, and asking people and creating an environment where people are not intimidated by coming up to you and saying, that didn't come across as well as it could have. And my assistant, I don't like calling her my assistant, Raylene, because she's my colleague. She just happens to help me with stuff in my role. I always say to Ray, after every engagement, every town hall, how did that come across? To her credit, there's been a couple of times she's gone, maybe touch on this point next time. So I see you laboured a little bit more on this. Maybe you should have gone that way. Hey, thanks. And empowering people to do that, because if you employ people to be yes sir, yes ma'am, no sir, no ma'am type people, good luck.
In this room during COVID, we were doing multiple webinars because there was no other way of delivering. So our business, we lost 92% of revenue because it was all live events, coaching, and doing big conferences. So this became we were literally living out of this room. And we just got into a feedback cycle after every webinar. And I learnt this, thank you, from people like you in the Defence Force. And it's 3 questions. What worked well? What didn't? What can we improve next time? And when I was younger, especially in my keynote presenting, I wanted all the feedback. What worked well and maybe a few little improvements, but what didn't? I now run towards that. And that's the bit where I learn the most. So we've built that into our feedback cycle.
Yeah, we do that after every time we present, webinars, online. So that, I think, helps accelerate learning and accelerate improvement. So like you said, not shying away and not having a team of people around you that just says, yes, you did great. You're not going to learn from people that tell you you've done a great job all the time. The greatest learnings are from when you haven't done a great job.
I liked it when you didn't push back, Ange. And you just,
but that's the challenge we've had in the military, right? Where intrinsically we're a chain of command orientated type of organisation, where for you to advance historically in this organisation, it's about impressing people above you. And how do you naturally impress people above you? You tell them what they want to hear. And over many, many years, thankfully, we've turned into an organisation now where some of our best star-ranked officers, in my opinion, are ones that turn around and say, hey, how did that come across? And if you're just filling vacant space to make me feel good, I'll pick it up really quickly. And General Campbell was one for me that would genuinely say, "Hey, how did that come across?" And some of the best conversations I've had with star-ranked officers, including him, have been, "Hey, boss, you may need to look at this time. Maybe concentrate on this next time, or look at that." And they go, "Okay, yeah, thanks." And it hasn't affected you. It hasn't affected you career-wise. I think there's still some elements within the Australian Defence Force where we need to get after that. But I still use Special Operations Command as that vanguard, that example where, they rely on that continuous feedback loop cycle, and good luck if ego gets in the way of it. I was very fortunate to be invited to go over and witness their Special Forces selection, which for the first time is combined with the Special Air Service Regiment and their commando selections course I interact. So you could imagine some of the alphas on Andrea.
From my end, I'm just going, I would love to see that. That would be just like.
So you imagine some of the alpha personalities, right? But from the onset, it is not forced upon them, but it is implied that for you to be successful to get through this course, you better have a fair degree of humility, and you better have a fair degree of acceptance in regards to when you are given feedback which may not be entirely nice to hear. And it just reinforced to me that if the sharpest end of our organisation from a human capability perspective can do it, well, why can't everyone else? And they're employed to do the sharpest at the war fighting end. If we are ignorant to that across the rest of the organisation and be able to do that, noting full well that we're still on an orders and instructions type organisation. But when we're dealing with people, that'll only get, you need to have an understanding of that social mastery and emotional intelligence.
I used to get conference briefs. I think I've probably only had 2 this year where this is said, and I jump down the phone now, or if I'm in a room, I react. Andrew, we would like some soft skills. So we're doing all the important stuff. We want you to come in and do soft skills. Like if anyone's listening to this and still says, get it out of your reputation, it's freaking awful.
I was going to say, when you said it, I was like, I haven't heard soft skills in ages.
Yeah, I've only heard it like twice this year. It used to be regularly, but it was implied that running a business and finance and operations and sales and marketing, that's all the hard skills, or commanding a boat, or flying a plane, that's all the really heavy stuff. And we'll do the nice fluffy, what did you call it? It used to be in defence, flowery?
Flowery was one, or the fruity stuff.
Fruity. So I love now that social mastery is built in. Now we had a conversation very similar in this room with Commander Dean Thompson, who is instrumental. Do you know Dean?
Yeah, I know of him. Yeah,
so he was instrumental in when we launched this program, and we spoke about the difference between leadership and followership. And I'm curious to get your view, because I've learned a lot from defence on this.
Look, I'll take it back. I'll scale that back a little bit. In order to be a good leader, you need to be a good follower. And it's a rather general comment, but it still rings true in that you won't have an understanding of what it takes to be a good leader unless you've had the ability to be able to follow and have an understanding, be humble enough to be a follower. And even the most senior officers we have in the organisation, they answer to someone, right? And they've learnt to be understanding that what it takes for a team to be successful and for you to be individually successful as a leader, you're being humble enough to be a good follower and being able to receive instructions, orders, to be able to give feedback in order to have an understanding about what it takes to get to the end of a mission or to achieve an end state, which the leadership has given you. In order for that to occur, I think being that good follower, being able to listen to hear, if that makes sense, as opposed to listening, knowing that already you have an answer, or taking that opportunity to go, right, walking into a room despite knowing, having a good, you were talking about before, Andrew, about having confidence. I still walk into a room thinking that I'm the dumbest person in the room. And for the most part, I am. When I walk into some parts of this organisation, from a technical mastery perspective, I sit around and I go, wow, just the brain power in this room is fantastic. But I'm humble enough to realise that, you know what, I bring a different mindset or a different part of expertise in regards to leadership. And I learnt that from being humble enough and having followership thrust upon me, in that when I was a junior rank, I found that most of my colleagues were being promoted way before me. And I was ignorant to the fact that, why was that? Well, because I wasn't a good follower. Yeah, my chain of command, my corporals and my sergeants didn't have the trust that I'd be able to move above the rank level that I was at, because I couldn't clearly listen to orders and instructions. I couldn't clearly be part of a wider team. So a long answer to a short question there, Andrew, is that I think to be a really effective leader is having understanding what it takes to be a really good follower, and being humble enough to be able to listen to hear, and being humble enough to be able to be part of a team, noting that you may have leadership ambitions, that's fine, but laying the foundation and getting that foundation right, because it'll set you up for success as you proceed up through the ranks, especially in the military.
One of my observations in the discussion today, and I'm really looking forward to listening back to this, because when you do a podcast interview, you're talking, go, oh, that's gold, and then you're moving on to the next thing. So I'm really looking forward to listening back. My feedback to you in the moment is you are precise, you're calm, and you're measured. How did you train that? And I'll go off tangent for a while, and that might give you some time to work out how you're going to answer. I'm doing a lot around mindfulness, and I used to think mindfulness was a crock of shit. But 2,500 years ago, the Japanese samurais were practicing mindfulness, because when you've got a massive double-edged sword and you've got another samurai coming at you, you need to be present. At the same time, yogis in India were practicing this form of being present as well. So the definition of mindfulness that I like is being present in the moment without judgment. And when you look at the research, because we've got parallel, the samurais and the yogis, got to be something going on. And often in the West, we go, where's the evidence-based research, Ken? Where is it? Well, we've been practicing it in different formats for thousands of years, but the research is now caught up. So mindfulness as a construct is just being aware of your thoughts, your emotions, your body, and the environment around you. And the second level, mindfulness, leads to wisdom and insight. I cannot help but sit here and think. You've got a good awareness of your thoughts, your emotions, your body and the environment, and you've got wisdom and insight. So have you trained mindfulness? Has this been a conscious approach, or has it just naturally occurred?
Let's get to some vulnerability then. For the most part, I reckon it's 50% shop front window, where it's been, there's a part of my life where I'm still anxious. There's part of my life where I could, in some of my personal relationships, be much more emotionally involved and invested. I think, to answer your question, over a period of time, I've learnt that if to be successful is to take control of your emotions, concentrate on what you're really good at, but also have an understanding about what you're not good at, and be rather open and honest about what you're not good at. And I could be much better at personal relationships. I could be much better with relationships with my children. Spending more time with them would be ideal, and I know you'll probably get to work-life balance, which I'm not really good at. But stuff like that, I think, to be perfectly honest, I've concentrated on 50% about what I'm really good at, and that is in a professional workplace setting, being confident and noting that as a leader in this organisation in the military, that getting upset, and we used to have a saying in the organisation, and still today, I'd say to officers, don't run around anywhere, sir. Don't run around anywhere, man, because you'll startle the troops, right? If they see you running around getting panicked, well, then they'll start panicking too. And I've learnt that really quickly, is that for the most part in the roles that I've performed, being anxious, getting overly emotive, showing signs of frustration or outward hasn't particularly worked in the past for me. But then also I've acknowledged that in the past, from a mindfulness perspective, is that I need to, as we were talking about before, I need to be able to acknowledge that what I'm not good at, and then say, well, I'm going to try and work on that. Now sometimes I'll be successful, sometimes I'm not. But I think that's worked for me the most in a professional setting. But I can't honestly sit here today and tell you that, whilst I really appreciate your compliments, for the most part, I've still got a lot to work on personally.
Okay, I'm going to come to that. There's an open loop. But do you practice mindfulness? Do you journal? Do you use breath work, imagery?
I read a lot. So I really invest a lot of time in reading. I wouldn't say books or journals or articles just on mindfulness, but more so just health and well-being. I'm still clearly a work in process, but I read a lot, and I suppose that shapes my viewpoint about where I think I should be going. But it has helped me, especially in regards to the regulating of my emotions and the regulating of my competitiveness and the regulating of having an understanding about how I get my message across.
I can't imagine you can do your job without that emotional regulation.
Yeah. I mean, if as a senior leader in this organisation and in the position I'm in, if I am trying to get across a viewpoint and it's emotive in nature, I'll lose the attention of the people that I really need to convince. And as I say to workforce when I get around to do town halls and public engagements with the ADF workforce, I say, hey, look, I understand some of the topics that we talk about are emotive in nature, but think about me walking to the office of CDF and saying, with an emotive response, saying we need to change something, as opposed to, sure, have a passion for something, but being able to regulate yourself to put forward a solution to a problem or a potential initiative, workforce initiative, or retention and recruitment workforce initiative, for example, being able to put that forward in a rather, sometimes passion helps, but for the most part, putting it forward in a neat and informative and less emotive type response to people, that's when you'll get people going, oh, okay, right, now I see your point. Because with emotional reactions, that's all people remember. I mean, some of even people I work with on a semi-regular basis, they start with emotion, and I always say to them, hey, I'm on your side. I'm on your side. So, or I'll start a conversation by saying, I agree with you in principle. Before we even start, I know what we're going to be talking about. I agree with you in principle. I just need you to give me some further information in order to help me support your cause.
So you're saying that to meet them with their emotion, to get them off the attack,
Absolutely.
and to settle into it.
100%.
I'll just add, for people listening to this who aren't from a defence background, CDF, Chief of Defence
Force.
I notice sometimes in our podcast as well, we just, because we now
acronyms.
speak military, and so for people who don't,
Yeah,
CDF,
my apologies. I should have been mindful
I've
of
got
that.
to pick you up on, you mentioned you still get anxious.
Oh, yeah.
I would not have picked that up talking to you today.
No, look, it's something that I feel we touched on it previously about, it's a little bit of imposter syndrome too, I think. I explain to people, I've been very fortunate that I've worked for some really influential people throughout the years that have kind of guided me down a path, and I've been successful in being promoted to the position I am today. And then sometimes I can't help but think, oh, geez, I'll be standing in front of 100 to 1,000 ADF folk, and they're all looking at me for sage advice and counsel and wisdom, and I'm like, I was sitting in that chair 10 years ago seeking the same thing, and I was wondering how that person ever did that. And I just, sometimes it's imposter syndrome, but then I'm very fortunate to have a family who support me in that. But I fail them on a semi-regular basis too, like my work-life balance. And I'm very fortunate to have an executive assistant, Raylene, who makes sure that time is built into my schedule to spend time with my family. And my family is not in Canberra; it's outside of Canberra, but making time. And then being in the moment, I struggle at times with too. So when I'm with my family and my friends, being in the moment and investing that time with them instead of thinking about work, I'm very guilty of that.
And you would travel a lot with your role as well?
100%. I just came off 10 days of leave, and I reckon it took me 5 days to just wind down. And so really I only really had, if CDF's listening to this, I really only had 5 days of leave, so I'll be asking for more at some point. But all jokes aside, I wish I was better at that.
I'm going to teach you that. I won't do it right now, but I'm going to take you through a process.
No,
and
we'll read your book,
next holidays, so it's the evolution of that. It's the down regulation activities. Yeah. But back to what I was asking on, do you train this in sport, especially elite sport? You see 80 minutes, and Anthony Seibold, I'll quote Siebes at Manly, said that's our best 80 minutes of the week. But it's the training, the 20 to 25 hours to get the 80. So you've got to train these skills in a non-pressurised environment so you can pull them out of your pockets when you need them most.
Clearly, from a professional mastery perspective, I've been doing that for nearly 30 years. But at what cost? There's always a cost, right? And the cost has been developing of my emotional intelligence with my family, or having conversations with my children, for example, where I've got to remember that they're not members of the military. they're my kids, right? And they're, I remember.
Don't you understand the chain of command in this house?
Yeah, my wife will tell she tells a funny story about when we first met. Everything was great for about 3 or 4 months, and I was like, this is clearly the love of my life.
That's called the start of a relationship.
Yeah, no, absolutely it was. But then one day, I think we were having a differing of opinion, and I used the old knife hand. And I said, yes, but. And she goes, if you ever point your hand at me again like I'm one of your recruits, we'll have issues. And I was like, damn, and I was till this very day just really letting go of your professional side of your persona and who you are and what you do in the position you hold, and being a good father, a good husband, a good friend. I've not been good at those things, and it's a work in progress. And I think I'm better than I was a decade ago. But reading your book clearly has shown that I've got some ways to go.
You're only halfway there. We're going to get you to 100-year life, so we've still got. Isn't that exciting when you think I've made these mistakes, and this is from my perspective, and stuff-ups along the way, and learned some stuff, and I've still got half of my life left. Do you have a process of shifting state when you go from defence role to family role, or do you just transition?
Yeah, look, what I've worked on it's about a 2.5 hour drive from. So during the week, if I'm in Canberra, I'll live in Canberra, and I've got an apartment there in Canberra where I live by myself. And so for the most part, when I'm at work, and what I haven't been great at is I'll work a lot after hours. I get a lot of stuff, emails, for example. I'll get to them, but then that 2.5 hour drive to my family, I've started to use that as my download session, where I'll listen to, generally try and listen to podcasts which aren't defence related or national security related. I'll listen to music. And so by the time, I think I've got better as when I get home, I'm better now at having let that part go. What I am guilty of is, I think we all are at times in regards to technology. I've got that work phone with me 24/7, right? And for the most part, I need it. But for the most part also, I don't need to check it every minute of the day. And that's stuff which I've clearly had to work on and continue to work on. So, yeah, I've used that. I think that's been good for me. But, I'm open to any other suggestions.
Well, first of all, what's your favourite track? So you're driving along the highway and you're listening to some of your favourite tunes. What bands?
Oh, geez, I'm actually listening to a lot of old stuff now. 80s and 90s music, Australian rock, Crowded House. I'm a massive U2 guy, so I've listened to a lot of U2, and some of their stuff was like early 80s.
Bon Jovi man as well, the 80s glam rock.
A bit of Bon Jovi. I don't mind those old style bands like that, like Skid Row and Motley Crue and all those bands. But invariably a lot of their music kind of gets you up and about. I like their music, which is kind of a lot of U2 music for me is kind of, it's reflection music. It tells a story as opposed to wild rock or anything like that.
Favourite U2 song?
I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Just the opening of that song.
Yeah, I think so. And then, I could speak to the whole Joshua Tree album. I think has been pivotal for me. Get me to a really safe space, I suppose, or a emotive state. Joshua Tree I could listen to on loop. But yeah, probably that type of music. I used to, when I was younger, I'd be in a bit of that American rap music and hip hop. I've kind of moved away from that. I mean, it's still.
I can see you busting a few hip hop rap names.
Oh no, I can tell. I'm about as flexible as a pole out there, Andrew. But probably that type of style of music, and that's what I listen to in order to kind of help me wind down. I found it's helped a lot, and I'm a massive fan of that rainfall. What's that? It's Amazon rainfall music.
Spa music.
Spa music, stuff like that.
The Calm app has got some beautiful. Moshi for kids. We're into Moshi for kids at the moment. Or Millie, our 2-year-old, goes, can we listen to Moshi, not Moshi? And Sophia says, she doesn't really understand. So it is Moshi. But it's these beautiful stories.
I've been driving in 35 to 40 degree heat outside and listening to rainfall music. And it's been just wonderful. Like it just from a calmness perspective.
Yeah, you sound really calm when you say that. Next time the 2.5 hour drive and you're listening everything from rainfall music to Motley Crue to In the Name of Love and everything else you're listening to, 30 seconds before you walk in the door, I've got to give you one little tip and for our audience. And when I do this, I nail it. I meet my family where they are. When I don't, I get feedback like I had recently from Michaela, who after talking to you today, Mickey, you're going to join the Defence Force. You've just solidified that. She said to me, aren't you a mental skills coach? You get home and you've been the big dog, the big brass at work, and it's all going really well. And then half an hour, you're at home. What's wrong with everyone? None of you listen to me. I've been working my backside off. And you grab a glimpse in a mirror and go, hey, I've found the problem. It's me. There's a theory, social contagion theory, mirror neurons in the brain. How we show up is how they show up. So after a busy day, my family really don't care what I do. Archie, my son, loves that I work in defence. He'll be excited about this chat. The rest of my family, no disrespect, they don't care. They want me to be dad and Tony wants me to be her loving partner. So I'll just park the car and I'll breathe. And it's 30 seconds. And anything in relaxation, the breath has got to be slightly longer, double the exhalation. So 4 seconds in through the nostrils, 8 seconds out. And I just ask, how am I going to show up?
Yeah, what's the first thing they're going to see when you walk through?
How am I going to show up with the little girls? How am I going to show up with Archie and Mickey? My elder two are only there half the time. And so it's really important that I talk hello to everyone. Tony, how was your day? When I do that, I nail it, but I don't always do it even though I teach it.
But it's simple. It's a simple but something which it can be so compelling too, right? No, thank you for that. We're all looking at Ange. We're all looking at Ange going, what's next?
Say something wise.
I really appreciated this talk, and I think you've shown that being a leader, vulnerability, courage, being open to feedback, that's something a lot of our listeners can learn a lot from and resonate with. But also being open to continuous learning as well, recognizing that you're not perfect and that there are things that you can continue to work on, makes you very relatable.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and no, I appreciate it, Ange and Andrew. I suppose there's a line that you you're walking down, I suppose it's a tightrope you're walking every day, right? It's how do you balance it? And for the most part, my foundational mantra is be a good human, right? And as part of being a good human is being humble, relevant, engaged and professional. And they're the four things. Now, I'm an ex-drill instructor, so keeping things to numbers and relatively small numbers is really good.
You go forward. I go through with math. You've gone one up.
Oh, have I? Oh, geez, I'm more complex than I thought. But that humble piece forms the basis of being a good human, staying relevant with the people that you charge with responsibility of leading, whether that I go just talking about communication style. There's 2 generations between the generation I joined and now the generation joining the Australian Defence Force. How they communicate is entirely different, but how do I stay relevant and ensure that I can get messages across to them? It might be through Snapchat or Instagram or whatever.
Are you on Snapchat?
I am. Funny enough, I had a leading aircraftsman say to me one day, hey, sir, if you send me an email, I might get to it in a week. You send me a Snapchat, I'll read it within 5-10 minutes. So how about you get me information through Snapchat? And I have to admit, I laughed. I went, what? And then I walked away and I thought, for information of an unclassified nature, that is just general information. Why don't we use those platforms? Anyway, that's a sidebar. I'm not suggesting 1 minute defence using Snapchat, but staying relevant. The engaged piece. So we've all met people throughout our lives, leaders throughout our lives have never been engaged. They've just led from a sense of, that ivory tower type. You might have followed them because you've had to. But in the military, I want people to follow senior leadership and leadership at the tactical operational level because they want to and because they feel inspired to. And being engaged with your workforce is important. And my last one is being professional. Nothing will get in the way of your credibility waning really quickly than your lack of professionalism. And that's basically your interactions with people and how you treat them and how you go about your business, both in and out of uniform. So don't get me wrong, I've learnt those lessons the hard way also. And I've just been very fortunate where I've had people in my life that have led me down that path. So thank you for this opportunity today. I've got more out of it probably than what you've got out of me. But yeah, it's like you said, Ange, it's continual learning.
I'm going to pull you up on that one. I think that's totally erroneous. We've got so much out of this. The only way I can think the appropriate way to wrap this up is what we call a flip. Is there a question or is there a topic in preparation you did some work on or you were prepared for that you thought we'd ask that we haven't? Or do you want to flip it and ask us a question?
I'm going to flip and ask you a question. So in today, it's no secret that the Australian Defence Force is struggling to recruit to the numbers that we need. Now, I mean, it's well known. Nothing I'm asking you is out of line in that regard. It's well known. As civilians, what would you advise the Australian Defence Force to do in order to make employment within the organisation more attractive?
You can lead first, Ange. That's a great question.
Do we need to be more transparent? Do we need to be more open in relation to our communication style? What would get people, even listening to this podcast, go, you know what, I'm going to think about a career in defence?
I think what came across for me that thought, oh, wow, even though I'd heard it before, but that theme of family, of that connection and purpose. Not that I watch much TV, but the advertising that I see, I don't think that I see that.
Could be better.
I think I hear that from you, and that comes across really strongly, but it's not something that I associate with the military. When I'm thinking, hey, join the military, you get connected, and there's so much strong relationships that you develop from it, and it becomes something that becomes so foundational in what a lot of people that we speak to in terms of their biggest takeout is the relationships that you gain from that.
That's excellent feedback. Yeah, I think you're right. I look at, we have a whole bunch of well-meaning and professional people in our recruiting organisation, and you know, I look at some of the ads that come out, and I look at it because I'm internal to the organisation. I go, wow, that's awesome. Look at that aircraft, look at that submarine. Who wouldn't want to be part of this organisation? But then that's why I was interested in your viewpoints, because you provide a totally different perspective outside of that narrow focus that I probably have in that space. So thank you. Andrew?
I've got a different answer.
Yeah, please.
Because if I gave you an answer now, there's some cognitive bias, because defence is one of our biggest contracts. And I'm just being totally transparent. So what I would say now at my age is different to when I was 20. So I
So
finished.
what would make 20-year-old Andrew join the military?
Yeah, 20-year-old Andrew was a bit of a dick. Just I wanted to go to the Olympics and be a personal trainer and get some biceps and meet some girls. But you can't really recruit for that. I finished running at 27. I reckon there's a whole bunch of people around that age who are finishing, sport, semi-professional sport, and or making that transition. They've done a degree, they're working in an area, and they're not quite engaged. I explored going into defence, but when I looked way back, I know it's changed a lot, but it just seemed too complex, the barrier to get across, and I didn't understand the humility, the warmth, the companionship. So going back, if it was more around that relationship and connectivity, but also you don't have to be there for life, but we're going to give you a network or a platform. So that's what I've said to Michaela. Like, Mumu, even if you don't join Army, Air Force, Navy for the rest of your life, darling, I'd love you to join. She said, Dad, why? I said, you're going to learn from some wonderful men and women. You're going to learn about leadership and followership. I'm your best recruiter. You're going to learn about different environments, and you're going to learn around the world and politics. So can you think of a better grounding than to have that? So my view, I'll get to the point, I would try and recruit people that this may not be for the rest of your life, but if you're unsure, it's a bloody good option with some bloody good people, and it's going to give you skills that you will never, ever forget.
That's excellent answer, only because parts of our organisation and people in it have to get really comfortable with the changing dynamic of the Australian worker, in that the Australian military and employment within it might only be a stepping stone to something else. My generation, or our generation, when you join for life for the most part. But then I think back and I go, I'm the last serving person in so 30 years ago, the class of 90, one of the first class of 95, so nearly 30 years, I think I'm one of the last of one or two people still in. So that's taught me a lesson too, in that when I joined, I thought, this is all I'm doing for the rest of my life. But there was a bunch of other people in that recruit class I was with that weren't thinking that. But back then, you never ever said that. And sure, we'd love to have you in for a couple of decades or even a whole career. That's fine. But I think if we concentrate on what you've just mentioned there, as well as Ange, about touching on the family and the value side of thing, and being part of a well-meaning and value-based organisation, crossing over to the experiences that you'll have, as well as the opportunities that will prepare you for the rest of your life, regardless of whether it's in the military or not. Concentrating on an ad like that, I reckon, would
and
be
maybe throw in the
great.
kicker. You get an education, we pay for your degree, and with that, there's some time you need to give us for that commitment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And don't get me wrong. One of the pieces of feedback I've received in the past is that you make this military employment as being this wonderful opportunity. Hey, some of the best lessons I've learned in this organisation have been because I've had to work hard for it. And there's been times in this organisation, even to this very day, where you're working 16, 20-hour days and you're thinking, you're waking up going, why am I doing this? And it's the purpose and the end state about why you're doing it. And it's nothing ever gained in life, as you know, through your sporting career, Andrew, and your own, has been worthwhile because you've worked hard for it. And it's the same in the Australian military. We will not give you something for nothing. But when you earn that, whether you earn that beret, whether you earn that badge, that rank, that achievement within the organisation, that medal, whatever, commendation, whatever, it's because you've bloody worked for it. And that keeps you going. That gives you that sense of purpose. And the Australian military, I'll unashamedly say, has that in droves. We just need to get you in the door. And I think those two pieces of feedback you've given are excellent, especially something I didn't even think of, especially from the values perspective of family and sense of teammate and mateship. I think we concentrate a lot.
You're going to write the new ad,
Yeah. Well, I think we concentrate a lot on the capability, like, with the submarine, the soldier, the weapons, and then the aircraft.
All the cool stuff.
Yeah, as opposed to what is really the cool stuff.
And what's an epidemic at the moment is loneliness. Like we are more socially connected on TikTok, and as I say to my kids, get off tick, and they all, Dad, you're such a loser.
The Instagram.
Is the internet still here?
Hey, we've gone through that journey though, so we're still coming to the end of the journey from the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. So we're learning lessons, and we've learnt lessons, and we're about to get a whole bunch of recommendations come down in relation to that, is that we haven't treated our people well in the past. And we acknowledge that. And I'd like to say to all serving personnel and veterans out there that senior leadership in this organisation are really focused on ensuring that culture in the organisation goes to the heart of that. We haven't treated our people well in the past. But like I said before, the organisation that we have today and the way that we treat our people and values-based is primarily, largely, 180 degrees different than it was 30 years ago. And I think, similar to you, Andrew, with my children, I'd be more than happy to have any one of them join Defence and be confident that they'll be treated well. I can't say the same of the organisation that I joined. And it's not because I'm any less passionate or defensive of it, but I know that there were parts of that military service back then that didn't particularly care too much for. I look at elite sport 20 years ago when I first moved from track and field into team sport, and you're a commodity. You'd have 11 starting or 15, 18, whatever denomination. And if you don't make the numbers, you're no good to us. We now have a lot more care, and we're looking at the whole person. Hey, one open loop. Yeah. You give blood regularly? Yeah, I do. Yeah, all the time. As much as I can. I had an overseas trip which stopped me from doing it. I went to a part of the world where I had to come back and wait a certain period of time before I could do it. I just think it's something which is it's easy, and it's something that I know selfishly makes me feel pretty good, actually, that I'm kind of contributing towards someone else potentially having their life saved from it. But it's service stuff like service before self, I think, is a good mantra, and it's less about me and the individual act. It's more about the contribution towards something greater than yourself. And I think giving blood is probably one of the most simplest thing you can do, right?
We spoke to Michael Klim. He's got his new book out.
Yeah.
I'm going to connect you and Michael for a bunch of reasons, because Michael is a spokesperson in Australia now for giving blood. He gives blood every few weeks.
I'd love to.
Especially with the challenges he's had around his autoimmune disease.
I was going to say, I might be a bit of a fanboy, unfortunately, if I see Michael Klim.
He's a legend, he's a wonderful man. I see some parallels in both of you. Yeah. And I'm not going to give too much away.
Well, clearly not the athletic side, I'm hoping.
Well, you're both good athletes, but there's been that evolution. Now, talking to Klim, he's a very different person. I'm not going to say too much because I want you to listen to the podcast. That'll take up about 1 hour and 15 minutes on your 2.5 hour drive home. But I'd love to connect you two. I think there's some good lessons he may be able to bring to leadership and what you're doing. We'll
love that.
Get you to meet him as well.
Thank you.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation today.
Definitely hasn't gone the way that we planned, like it always does. But I think we went. I loved the.
I hope we got to some of the points.
Oh, we got to better points. We went to a level and a depth that I think teaches a lot of lessons outside of the military as well. Leadership lessons, whether you're in the military or in the corporate world or even as a parent. I think a lot of what you spoke about, being humble, being vulnerable, being open to feedback, as anybody in the position of leadership, they can learn a lot from.
Thank you. It's been mutually beneficial, it seems. I've loved my time on here, and thank you for inviting me. It's been a wonderful experience.
Warrant Officer Ken Robertson, OAM, official. Thank you very, very much for today.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thanks, Ange.